Hey guys, this is Ben Lingle
And I'm Josh Oswald.
from BL Photography, and today we just wanted to do a quick Lightroom tutorial on how we edit photos, what our workflow is once we actually get into the development module in Lightroom. And we're just really excited. This is going to be our first YouTube video, so please subscribe. And if you have any questions, of course, feel free to comment below or do any of that you traditionally do on YouTube. So today we're editing a photo from a couple session that we did quite a few months back, but just for the sake of showing you our workflow, this is the photo we chose. So I'm just going to ask my buddy Josh. So Josh, when we actually go to a session and once we actually get the images in, we shoot raw. That's the biggest thing. We're going to shoot raw because with raw, it's an uncompressed file. It's completely able to be manipulated in easier ways than a JPEG, where the JPEG, all of the in-camera stuff, say like sharpness, exposure, color saturation, whatever you have set as your camera preset, suddenly becomes baked into the image. So with that being said, when we're actually at a session, what's the first thing you're looking for when you actually take your photo?
Exposure.
So what's the big deal about exposure? Why is exposure important?
Well, for me, if you get your exposure right, the picture is going to be beautiful. You don't want it to be really overexposed and bright and washes out all the color, but you also don't want to be too dark where it'll make everything like black.
That's true. And so, especially with these more modern lenses that camera companies like Nikon, Canon, Sony are coming out with, a lot of those little things like fringing, highlights, and shadows and all that, they'll indicate on the camera if it's too bright or too dark, depending on what you have your settings at and what the image actually shows. But for the sake of this actual video, we're using Lightroom. This is our post work, as they call it. So you said exposure was the first thing you looked at. We got it pretty good in camera already, but we're going to go ahead and probably bump this up about 0.10. So that's the first thing we're going to do.
It's looking better already.
Yeah, so the thing that I always look for when I'm doing my Lightroom edits is that I'm going to start at the top. So rather than picking around, like I'll start with clarity and vibrance and then I'll go to shadows, I'm going to start with exposure and just work my way completely down the actual basic module over here.
So basically exposure, then contrast, and your highlights, shadows, and etc.
Yep.
Down through the list.
Yep, just follow them down. That's the easiest way to do it, and then you can always go back later if you want to fix something. So the first thing we're going to do is do the exposure. We brought it up plus 10, or plus 0.10, should I say. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bump my contrast up. Especially, guys, if you are photographers who like to print your images and you like to print them big, make sure to add some contrast to your images so when you actually get them in print form, they're not washed out or look, washed out. So I'm going to bump this up to, let's say, about 25. I think that's looking good right there. I like the 25 look. Highlight, we may bring just a little bit of highlights up. Not a lot, though. They have, if you look right here, you can actually see, they have a little bit of highlight on their faces here.
Yeah.
And so we brought the highlights up. I'm a sucker for always bringing my shadows up. I know that kind of takes a little bit of contrast out, but that's just kind of like what I like to do. Not a lot, just enough that I can kind of see where our shadows are at. So we're going to do shadows. Whites and blacks we're going to leave alone. Clarity we're going to leave alone. And the reason I'm leaving clarity alone is because sometimes I'll show you what it does. So clarity, it does not sharpen, but it adds a sense of sharpening by making something more contrasty. So basically I'm going to avoid that because I kind of want this more of a, not soft image, but more of a glowy type of lustery feel to it. So I'm going to leave that clarity off. We don't have a lot of color to work with here, so I'm going to be careful with how much vibrance I bring up, but I'd say let's bring it up to 5 for now.
Yeah.
Is a good starting place. We'll leave saturation alone. Tone curve, we'll do another tutorial on tone curve. The tone curve is a phenomenal tool for photo editing, but in this video it'd take too long to explain, and we're just giving you the basics of our workflow. So we'll do that in another video. All right, we're going to come down here I'm kind of looking at them, and they kind of got this yellowish, orangish hue to their skin.
Uh-huh.
I'm going to do a little bit of photo correction to that. What, do you agree with that? Or?
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay, so I'm going to grab the oranges here in your hue and saturation bank, and I'm just going to kind of go back and forth here. That looks pretty good at -5. I kind of added a little bit more redness back into their skin, and so I'm pretty happy with where that's at. So there's a little bit of green back here. This photo doesn't really have a lot of color, but we'll add just a little bit of saturation. That's fine right there. Okay, going down to the sharpness module over here, let's go in 1:1. As you can see, with the basic amount of sharpening at 25, this image is relatively sharp. Turning sharpness off, you can see it really honestly is a very sharp image. This was taken with the Nikon 70-200. It was taken at 200 millimeters and f3.2 and 1/60th of a second for our exposure time. So I don't know if we really need to add sharpening to this at all. What do you think?
It's pretty sharp enough for me.
Okay, so we'll leave sharpness alone. It's not a grainy image, so I'm not going to add any luminance over here. We're not going to worry about that. Now, going down even farther or further, we can see we have other stuff like, for instance, vignetting control. So we can see here there's a little bit of a vignette on it. I may just add just a little bit like that, but the only issue is he's kind of getting dark up here in the corner.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking we can just change our midpoint just a little bit, and we can feather this just some.
The thing I like about vignetting is it takes the picture and kind of encloses it, which kind of gives it more like this. It kind of gives it more of a sincerity to the special moment, you know. It like just makes it, you know, like it's a special moment. It's the big moment,
and it makes the focus of the individuals stand out more, because suddenly, like you said, it kind of boxes them in, which kind of accentuates them more, which is what we want with the portrait.
Yeah, because the focus is on them, not really the detail around them.
That's right. So basically, the next thing we're going to do is let's look at temperature, for instance. I'm kind of a sucker for making these images more yellow. I know you prefer more of a cool, where I prefer more warm. So you would probably lean towards more like this look right here.
Maybe a little bit, add a little bit more yellow to it.
Somewhere around there.
I don't want to pull out the yellow. However, I don't want to make them look like
right, too yellow.
Too yellow.
So I think that's pretty good right there. Would you say so?
Yeah, I like that.
Okay. Tint, it's kind of on the magenta side for me, but actually it's more on the green side, I would say. So I'm going to bring the magentas up just a little bit. Not where they look super pink, but 0 looks pretty decent to me. Okay, so going in here, the next step I do after I get my basic edit, you know, as far as color correction goes, sharpening, all that kind of stuff, the next thing I look at is their skin, the softness of their skin. Now, unless you're shooting at something like f1.4, f2, you know, we're shooting at f2.8, so for the most part, everything from, or f3.2, so for the most part, everything from edge to edge is going to be relatively sharp. You can see this in the detail of his skin. You can see all of his little pores and goosebumps and whatever. Well, we want to kind of soften that so it doesn't, you know, show up so prominently. So, but before we do that, I'm going to do some blemish correction. So he doesn't have a lot of blemishes, but he does have one here. So all you have to do, guys, is select this tool, make sure it's on heal, and basically just put your circle over the little area where the blemish is and just click, and it will remove it. What it does is it actually samples a part of the image and puts it over there and blends it in. It works pretty well. Now sometimes you'll have to go to something like Photoshop or another application to really get these photos down to a nice clean look on their faces. But for the most part, I do most of my skin corrections in Lightroom. So the hands are a little bit harder because we got to match the actual lines of the fingers, so be aware of that. Okay guys, the final thing that I do as far as portrait editing goes is the softening of the skin. Now remember, like I said earlier, that whether you're using a 1.4 or a 1.6, you may not have to soften the skin as much because, well, those lenses will render a tad softer than say at 3.2 or 2.8. But Lightroom has this really nifty brush tool over here. And basically, all you have to do is you go down here and they have a preset called Soften Skin. All Soften Skin is it takes the clarity down to -100. Now, I'm going to show you what this effect does, and I usually don't keep it at -100, but for the sake of this video, I'll show you what it looks like. So, basically, I'm going to make my brush decent size, and as you can see, it's softening up his skin. It's taking the clarity out, and basically,
A lot of detail as well.
yep, to make it softer, to make it look cleaner and better and whatever. But obviously, I'm looking at this image, and every time I look at, say, like softening skin, it's way too much for me. 100 is way too much. So basically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to soften his skin there, and we're just going to go back to the clarity over here, and I'm just going to slowly drag this up until I find a nice in between. So let's start with 74 on him. Okay, I'm going to deselect that so I can start a new brush, or you can click new up here. And I'm going to do the same for her. So I'm going to just soften her skin. Yeah, I know I'm going over here, guys.
You can see the major difference.
You can see the major difference. And it adds this kind of beautiful glow to it as well. Like their faces have a nice,
It does.
nice smooth glow. And
Now, come to think of it, I think they try to do that more in studio work.
For retouching. So guys, we're going to do the same thing here. We're just going to kind of drag it until we're pretty pleased. I'm going to do about 77 on her. So I'm pretty pleased with that. That looks pretty good. The final thing, along with the softening I'm going to do, is I'm going to whiten her teeth a little bit. Not saying she has yellow teeth, but it's always good to kind of bump up the teeth, make them kind of pop, but not pop so much that they look fake. So just go to the same module over there in the brush, select teeth whitening, and just kind of lightly brush over her teeth, just like that. Okay. Yeah, that looks pretty good. What do you think, Josh?
Yeah, I think we should show them the before and after.
Okay, so I'm going to show you before and after. So this is what we started with, and this is what we're ending with. So as you can see, we took a lot of the blemishes off of his face and off of her face, but we still have that nice clarity, that nice sharpness, and yet we have a nice soft skin, glowy skin, and it just looks really beautiful actually. The highlights look very nice on their skin, and I'm pretty pleased with the edit.
I like the vignetting on too there, in case you guys can see that as well.
Yeah, the vignette works very nicely. Well guys, we hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and if you want more, please like, subscribe, and comment on our videos. And of course, remember that photo editing is subjective, so this is just guidelines of what we do. It doesn't mean you have to do it this way. Alright guys, we'll see you in the next video.